So there was an interesting question that was posed last night on the podcast, and like you can check that out. We went over all kinds of stuff: Crimson Desert, DLSS 5, etc. But DLSS 5 did come up, and Raddick actually asked the question of, "Do you think the mainstream will think this stuff looks good?" And I think that's a very important question to ask because while I like to think that we steer the ship necessarily with a lot of the gaming market, we really don't. It does come down to the mainstream and what they think of these different games, what they buy, where their money goes. And you know what? I'm looking at DLSS 5, and I'll admit I have some concerns on that end. But now we're getting more and more information around how DLSS 5 is doing what it's doing, and it leads to a whole bunch of other concerns going forward. I just wanted to go over some of that here today. So if you guys enjoy the video, hit the like button and subscribe if you're new. So real quick, let's jump over here. This is on Nvidia's site. These are just comparison shots they have for DLSS 5 with the infamous one at this point. You can see being Grace from Resident Evil Requiem. And this is probably the example that everyone points to because it's the most egregious, where you have Grace here in a very, very dimly lit street. You can see just kind of walking down the street towards what is a crime scene that is not exactly an exciting place for her to be, after what I think probably working more than a shift, most likely, based on how they were setting it up at the police station with stacks and stacks of papers all around her and being really into her work at that time. So it's not like she was necessarily ready to go on a date or something. But then you have DLSS 5 on, and boom, she's on her way to a photo shoot for a magazine or something to cover her. And that's what I mean. It's very egregious in that what they're showing here doesn't really make a lot of sense for the scene necessarily. Now, the Nvidia said that the people behind the game, developers, artists, will have some control over, I don't know, the filter, how how aggressive it is and how much it actually changes here. But it's this is jarring, and it's very noticeable. All right, and this is the one that's gotten, I think, the most pushback out of all of them. There are some where people are like, it's not the worst necessarily, but it's some of these are quite egregious. There's this one here. I don't know if they have the slider for it. People were zooming in even on some of the results and noticing that he gets a little more of a nostril. He has hair all of a sudden grow on one side, and the question has come up: is this really just lighting? Because Nvidia keeps saying that. They're like, no, it's just lighting. That's all, and it's taking into account geometry in the scene, and it's working around all of that. But it doesn't. For many of us who are looking at it, it doesn't feel like it's just lighting, just based on what we're seeing in front of us. That's the problem. We have eyes. You can see what's happening here. And you're like, man, I don't know. It's just seems like more is going on here in this scene. Especially, I mean, take into account this needs 15090 to just run the game or the scene that's being shown, and then another 5090 to do the DLSS 5 processing and effect here. That seems like a lot, all right, for just doing lighting, we'll say, in this scene, all right? So we get a bit more information when a person on YouTube, Daniel Owen, asked some questions and got responses from an NVIDIA engineer around a lot of this. And I will say this: Daniel Owen knows he knows the questions to ask. So he's definitely the one to follow if you're trying to keep up on a lot of the DLSS 5 information, as he's very, very familiar with a lot of this. So this is from Video Cards, who actually quoted his video here, and I'll have it linked down below. It's also linked right here. DLSS 5 does not appear to read 3D geometry depth or artist-authored material data directly from the game engine. When asked whether the model is effectively taking a single 2D frame with motion vectors to create the output, the answer was yes, DLSS 5 takes a 2D frame plus motion vectors as input. NVIDIA also said the model understands scene semantics such as hair, fabric, skin, and lighting conditions, all by analyzing a single frame. And this immediately calls waves online, because it's like, hold on, as you can see, people are pointing out, wait, there's hair, there's like a little additional nostril here. It's almost like what's happening is DLSS 5 is seeing a single frame and then interpreting and spitting out a new frame, altering it essentially, not just overlaying lighting and trying to make it look more photorealistic. And that's kind of where we are now. It is now believed that that is what's happening, despite Jensen and Nvidia CEO saying all kinds of other stuff. Of course, saying that gamers are wrong with their response to a lot of this. But he seems to say that after saying they're completely wrong, the reason for that is because I have explained very carefully DLSS 5 fuses controllability of the geometry and textures and everything about the game with generative AI. So the other part about this is, so if you're taking each frame as it's coming in, you do have to process it very, very quickly. So now the 5090 does make a bit more sense in that regard. But if it's just screen space, which is another thing that was asked and seems to be confirmed, it's not going to be necessarily aware of things that are off of screen for what the person is seeing. So that's why when you look at some of these comparisons, and I'll go back to Grace here walking down the street. The thing that's so noticeable is all of a sudden you go from a very dimly lit street where maybe there isn't a bunch of lights being like a 3-point light system blasted at her here, to it looking like she's on the set of a photo shoot or on a movie set or something where they do have lighting all over the place. Because at this point, I've thought about where we are with game graphics and how much better things can get. It almost feels like DLSS 5 is Nvidia going, well, you gotta keep improving some way. AI has to keep being integrated more and more and more. So DLSS is kind of the marketing term for what doesn't feel like DLSS or look like DLSS. And it's kind of adding, to me, is a lighting for the sake of lighting. It has to kind of justify its own existence at this point. So it's like the scene it doesn't have the same feel or tone or anything. Now, this is an example that NVIDIA put out along apparently with Capcom, although developers now, as we're getting information from them, found out when a lot of us found out, and they weren't exactly thrilled about this. But these are the shots that NVIDIA and Capcom went, that looks good. Let's show everyone this. When, I know we had Digital Foundry seemed very excited about what they were seeing. I think a lot of it was the technology behind it that they were very excited on, although now we're getting information that, it might kind of be just an AI filter, and it becomes, to me, less exciting when you hear that. Seems less of a breakthrough and more of just, yeah, let's get generative AI in here. That's kind of what it feels like. Because look, people bring this up. Oh, we've had AI with DLSS. That's kind of its thing. It's using that to interpret and then upskill your game. Well, here's the thing. All right. If this didn't look bad, which in my opinion, this looks quite bad. If it didn't look bad, then I don't think you would have much pushback really with it. Here's the thing. Some people do think this looks good and there's no pushback because in their mind, it looks more photorealistic. It's what they want their game to look like, which is why I brought up the concerns around the mainstream. If they see this, does this look better to them than this? Maybe. And if that is the case and the market speaks and says, yes, DLSS 5 is where we want the future of gaming to go, there's just not going to be that much that we can necessarily do about it. But the thing is, when you look at previous DLSS, so here was the reveal for DLSS 3.5, and they're talking about, reflections. Yeah, you know what? It's a mirror. It's a window that can act like a mirror when viewed from different angles. And yeah, it makes sense to me. Okay, sure. That looks better. And you go down, okay, yeah, the shadows, they look more defined. Okay. And this is really their big thing. It's like, hey, check it out. Here's DLSS 3.5. It doesn't look egregious compared to what we see when you look at something like this. And that's always going to be, that's what it comes down to. If the output is awesome and it looks great, you're not going to have much frustration or pushback. The fact that there is so much tells me that, okay, I'm not alone, and people do think this looks bad. But here's where things get interesting. NVIDIA, while there isn't much of a push right now for things like 8K, they still have to figure out ways to continue advancing so they can sell more video cards eventually, but also giving more reason for their big push and investment for AI to continue. So before you'd be like, oh yeah, up to 16K. We have a pretty big roadmap now because that's eventually what we'll see. To me, looking around, most people are pretty content with 4K and they're more interested in image quality for, say, their OLED display. Now the conversation has shifted from, hey, 720p versus 1080p, 1080p versus 4K. Now it's kind of like mini LED versus OLED versus LCD, and like that's it. It's not really 4K versus 8K. And so Nvidia pushing something like DLSS 5 does kind of put them in the driver's seat of, hey, if this gets adopted, it's proprietary for Nvidia, and it will once again continue to make their video cards and their push for AI very, very relevant. And if it does work for them and it gets adopted heavily, say, by the mainstream, not now, but maybe in the few years down the line, AMD would have to follow then, which means that yes, your consoles would also follow. And that would be like the next, we'll say, I mean, it could be PlayStation 6, I mean, PlayStation 6 Pro, who knows? But we already see more and more stuff from AMD, and some of their methods for upscaling and frame generation stuff apparently working its way more and more into the PS5 Pro. Now we're seeing with PSSR 2.0, that being a collaborative effort even between Sony and AMD. Mark Cerny mentioning that frame generation will be coming to PlayStation consoles in the future. So you see all these different techniques making their way there. AMD comes up with their own version of DLSS 5 where it's doing AI processing for frames and it's making it look like the AI Snapchat filter. Then you'll kind of see that become more and more universal, kind of like when Nvidia was pushing for ray tracing heavily being baked into game engines back when they were showing off the 20 series cards. Now look, we got games showing up all over the place that do completely rely on ray tracing to the point where you can't run the game unless you have a card that can support it. And then I guess finally, the last question: how realistic do gamers want their games to look? Because growing up, there was always that thought process of eventually games will look photorealistic. Or you see the cinematics in Final Fantasy X and you go, man, someday that'll just be gameplay. And we kind of get there and we go a bit further now, and we're starting to see games that can take those cinematics that were complete breakaway shots from gameplay, almost have the camera swoop around, and it's very difficult to tell the difference between the cinematics. It's done in real time, and then it goes right to gameplay, and you see something like Resident Evil Requiem, and you go, wow, that looks real at times. It is crazy. But then you start to go, oh, wow, that looks real. I kind of like my games to look like video games in the sense that there is an underlying art style, even if it's somewhat subtle, that at least differentiates it from real life visuals. Part of the aha moment for me in regards to realistic visuals was this game called Body Cam that was being shown off on social media. And it was actually hard to tell if it was in-game footage or if it was a real video from a body cam at some point. All right. And I saw that and went, oh wow, yeah, that seems kind of strange to have that be what a video game looks like. It does seem too much like reality, you can say. So I don't know, that was almost off-putting to a degree when I saw that come across the feed. So it does make me think that now more and more as we go into the future, I would be more interested in just creative ideas for art styles as opposed to pushing more and more towards the realistic horizon for what video games should look like. And, I'm also a little concerned that if DLSS 5 really catches on like that, will a lot of games just end up looking the same? Because if they're using this AI interpreted filter for DLSS 5 and it's trained on social media and other edited photos that people posted up, are a lot of our games just going to have that same kind of look and filter, almost like how we have the Unreal Engine look and aesthetic that's worked its way in, and it's kind of difficult at times to differentiate between scenery in different games because they're using Unreal Engine. Is it going to be kind of like that with character models? I don't know. That seems kind of boring if that's a future that we're in for here, but those are some of my thoughts on DLSS 5. A lot's happened, and I just kind of wanted to catch up on it here in a video and ask some of you, what do you think now that we've had almost a week just to kind of think about and reflect on what's happened here with DLSS 5, some of the reactions from people, and let me know if there's anyone right now that you talk to that's not like super into games. Have you shown them some of these comparison shots, and which one did they like more? Because I'm a little concerned that we're going to see the mainstream crowd, maybe that buys the Maddens or the Call of Duties, and that's kind of it, go, oh yeah, DLSS 5, that's a good looking video game right there. It'll be quite interesting if that is the case. Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.